All right, everybody, welcome back. It's Saturday night. You're listening to America Now. I'm Barb Adams. Thanks so much for joining me. Well, I've got a great show lined up for you tonight, beginning with a discussion regarding Indiana's controversial Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Then in hour two, we're going to hear about a mind-blowing theory that may prove God's existence. Finally, in hour three, I'll be speaking with an Afghan native about what it will take to rebuild that war-torn country. I hope you stick around for the entire show, but if you do miss any part, you can listen to this or any of my shows in their entirety on my website, radioamericanow.com, under archives. Well, for the past week, Indiana has come under intense scrutiny and derision for its so-called fix to the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. While some 20 states have laws that are similar to the federal law, Indiana's SB 101 fix now ensures businesses can use the law to defend themselves against civil rights lawsuits by claiming their religious faith is being violated. Opponents, however, believe the law is targeted against the LGBT community. Joining me now is author and former statewide prosecutor and Deputy Attorney General of New Jersey, John J. Higgins. Together, we form the nonpartisan Practical Solutions for America, and we ask you to join us here on air every week and on our Facebook page to work together to find common ground in discussing and solving the challenges in America. If you'd like to join in tonight's discussion, give us a call, 800-259-5791. Again, that's 800-259-5791. John, how you doing?
I'm good, Barb, and you?
I'm well, thank you. You know, John, based on all this furor over Indiana's RFRA legislation, I noticed the Arkansas Governor Hutchinson this week declared he's not going to sign his state's new religious freedom bill, which was very similar to Indiana's, unless it's amended to reflect the federal law. You know, in your opinion, why are these states even sponsoring legislation like this right now when there's already a federal law?
Well, I actually think this is an example of how politicians were eager to provide services for corporate or religious interests, and it backfired. The funny thing about legislatures when they pass laws, I can give you an example. When we created drug-free school zone laws back in the 1980s, Arizona took our law and passed it, but they passed it verbatim. 2 days later, they had to amend it to remove all references to New Jersey. So the legislators don't always read what they're passing. And, it really wasn't an issue because they didn't have the second set of laws in place properly, which are the normal anti-discrimination laws. So what they ended up with was being in between. They created this wide open gap. And in doing that, they left themselves exposed. Now, the whole thing of this RFRA law really came about because of an old case that dealt with the Indians using peyote. And the Supreme Court basically said that if it was a facially neutral law, like an anti-drug law, that, the religions would not be protected because it wasn't geared to going after the peyote-smoking Indians. And that was contrary to what a lot of earlier law had been. So Congress passed the RFRA in the early 90s, when Clinton was president, to accommodate that, if the Indians wanted to use peyote in their religious ceremony, that was going to be allowed. And so the law just kind of kicked around for all of those decades without any real issue. But now when they start trying to do it to expand, corporate protections, Hobby Lobby is another way of trying to extend this whole idea of corporate personhood so that it has some kind of protections, but Hobby Lobby was restricted to closely held corporations. So if they had a religious belief about not giving contraceptives or funding abortions, that would be allowed. So the legislatures decided, well, at least those couple of legislatures decided that if they can expand that to major corporations by just, modifying or passing a new RFRA version. But of course, if they didn't have an anti-discrimination law that protected, gender or not gender, sexual identity or sexual orientation, left open the entire thing of gay weddings and marriages.
Which I find very interesting now. As it's becoming more socially accepted, I think the timing of this also is very interesting, that it seems to be coming up. And what I also found interesting, John, too, is that the original Federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act was written by Senator, Ted Kennedy, and also Chuck Schumer, who were both Democrats. But it seems a lot of these amendments and fixes now are coming out of the Republican side.
Yes, but and also you probably they were discriminated against over the years. I know the whole idea of protecting sexual identity in New Jersey. We had bias crime laws. It took us a long time before we could expand the normal protections under bias crime laws to include both sexual orientation and gender, because those were controversial in the 1990s in terms of expanding that kind of coverage.
Yeah, what I think, too, is interesting, John, is that many corporations today, something like 89% of all the corporations and businesses out there already have those non-discrimination clauses within their own policies. They specifically use the gender identity and sexual orientation in their policies. So it's like regular America, or the states now seem to be wanting to either catch up or, as you say, kind of play to that. But unfortunately, Indiana, in the beginning, wasn't going to add those words, sexual orientation or gender identity, in there, and that's where the firestorm happened.
Yeah, and rightfully so. I mean, like I say, it's one of those examples where things really were not thought through when they were looking at the whole picture. So it's almost like it was a zealous maneuver by taking, the Hobby Lobby ruling and then trying to maximize its benefit for the, more private interests or, more conservative interests. But when it really got pushed, what happened was they pushed right through the envelope and exposed it, in a way that really was, I think, rightfully so, a real problem for most Americans today.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because what it really ended up doing is, as you mentioned earlier, it's backfiring in their faces. I think they thought they'd have the whole religious movement on their side going, yeah, here we go. And it's turned around, and most of the American society are going, what the? This is not right. And especially in Indiana with major companies, Apple and Angie's List, where they're headquartered there, turning around and saying, all right, we had a $40 million project for expansion, and we were going to put our big headquarters here. Not going to happen anymore. So I think that Indiana really was stunned by the quick response here. What happened?
Yes, and I think that this is always the danger when they start pushing these other agendas without thinking things through. To me, it's almost like bad karma that comes back to you when you're out to try to expand something that's wacky or punishing other people. Sometimes it comes back and punishes you.
Yeah, and in this case, karma was pretty much immediate. John, we're going to be heading to a break. When we return, I want to talk about the role of the media, because I think the media, too, they ended up throwing a lot of gasoline on this fire, which is kind of interesting. All right, stay with us. America Now continues. All right, everybody, welcome back. John Higgins and I tonight are discussing the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And, John, before the break I mentioned the role of the media. They really did jump on board very quickly, and really what's new there. And that's kind of had both negative and positive effects. What's your thoughts on it?
Well, I agree with you that it was both negative and positive. On the positive side, it brought it into everybody's consciousness of what a mess that set of laws were that they had passed. On the negative side, I think that what they really did was that they inflamed a lot of the public, and I don't know that that's always the best thing to do. The thing I think that was probably the worst thing that came out of it was the naiveness of the one woman who owned that pizzeria business, appearing on television and saying that they would discriminate against a gay wedding. I mean, anybody who owns a business to first of all make any kind of comment like that was, to me, just naive and stupid. Yeah. And I mean, I think it's actually ruined their business. I don't know that they'll ever recoup from that, to be honest with you.
Not to be a spoiler here, but I think they're actually going to do better. Did you know that there was a crowdfunding started by Blaze TV, which is kind of associated with Glenn Beck and that whole group? They started it for the pizza shop. It's up to $842,327.
Right, but whatever they do, they better not be dealing with the public with whatever they're going to do, because they'll have no notoriety in terms of, having made that statement. I can see that, people would be picketing whatever business they start and do and all of those things. I mean, it's, sometimes, when I produced a play that used inner city high school actors, and I went all over the state with it, and sometimes we have TV that would come, and to be honest with you, it always made me cringe because people do screwy stuff when a camera gets pointed at them. I had a couple of girls the one day in one of the schools, 15 years old, pop up, and they announce that they're gay to the world. And I grabbed the correspondent and I said, if you put that on TV, I'm gonna make sure that we go after you. That does not belong on TV. And I think that they needed somebody guiding that woman in her business as well.
Well, yeah. And honestly, how many wedding parties get catered by pizzerias? I mean, the whole thing was insane to begin with. But here we go again, insanity in America.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I say, in some ways I felt sorry for the woman because, like I say, a TV camera gets pointed at people at times, and the most idiotic things come out of their mouth without them thinking through what they're even talking about, because they think they're going to get this moment of fame or whatever. I mean, and I was laughing to myself because at first I didn't realize it was just for catering weddings, because first of all I think that's ridiculous. I've never been to a wedding that was catered by a pizzeria. But I mean, I initially took it, are you going to be examining people who come through the door and deciding whether or not they're gay and whether or not you're going to serve them? And then on the other hand, what I also cracked up was that, let's say that they were invited to a wedding that it was, Sandy marrying Sandy or Terry marrying Terry.
Pat and Pat.
Right, Pat and Pat. How were they going to determine who these people were? And they were going to pack up the pizza and leave?
Yeah, they'd have to eat all that pizza themselves then, literally and otherwise.
Exactly. I mean, and I don't know, like I say, you and I say all the time, we live in America. We've finally gotten to the point in our lives in society that I really believe we don't discriminate to great degrees when it comes to what happens in a business with people coming to get served. We know that we cannot do that.
Well, yeah, and it was like even when you mentioned the Hobby Lobby thing. Yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous. And I can see where it linked back for them to not having to pay out for the health care stuff based on their, religious beliefs. But still, what businesses of theirs, whether or not a woman is using contraceptives? And by the way, are you going to stop it there? Or how about every one of us that walk in, are you going to ask us, hey, are you on the pill? I mean, really?
Right, and I think that whatever's happened in this Supreme Court, it's gone askew, where they've got this whole idea that businesses somehow have the rights of a person. Now, you could make the same kind of ruling where a business is in a different kind of class, but to make it into a person is making all of these screwy, determinations where you're giving rights to things that are basically entities, and they aren't people. They're not individuals who breathe and have their own thought processes and whatever. They're a corporation that's out to make money. And I mean, Hobby Lobby may be a closely held corporation because it's all family owned. Well, then don't be incorporated. Run as a sole proprietorship, and then that I can understand the distinction. But as soon as you have corporate benefits, because there is benefits to being a corporation that are granted by the state and the government.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you said they're not living beings, and I agree with you. But if they have their way, they certainly want to become that, don't they, with the rights and all the benefits? Because as we know, the corporations now under Citizens United are getting to use all this money to put their own people in place in government, which is another scary part of all of this.
Right, and the problem with the way these decisions are coming out is that they're getting the best of both worlds without the responsibilities of either. So, I mean, I always say that if a corporation is a person, let's draft it and then use all of its resources to fight as a soldier in a war someplace. You'll find out that that quickly disappears.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, and really when you start thinking about it, John, religious practices really shouldn't be extending probably to places of public, you know, where they're serving the public and stuff, should they? No. I mean, you have to have anti-discrimination laws so that everybody is treated equally. Otherwise, we're going to be back into the way the South was after the Civil War up until the 1960s, where it was separate but equal. You know, with this guise that everybody had equal rights, but, well, you know, if you're this color, you got to go over to that side. You can't come over to this side. And, I mean, where does that stop again? Well, it does seem there's a big, well, not big, I'm not going to put that even out there. It seems like there's a certain contingency right now trying to grab control to take us back to those not-so-good old days.
Right. Well, you know, that far-right conservative element always exists. But, you know, the problem is that since money now is gotten such political power, it's allowing that voice to rise again where I thought it had been silenced. Yeah,
you know, this is something I would have thought would have disappeared decades ago, but here it is again, all the same stuff, over and over and over again. It's like beating a dead horse. All right, we'll not beat this dead horse anymore here, America Now, hopefully. All right, stay with us. We will be back after the break. All right, everybody, welcome back to listening to America Now. John Higgins and I discussing the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and all the consequences that have since come up. And there have been many. But, you know, John, another thing that's bugging me about all of this is this push to get religion kind of into every little facet of our lives right now, including, did you know, there was a woman, representative in Arizona, who wants to mandate that everybody has to go to church.
Well, I know that there's a lot of religions that would love that kind of mandate, particularly with the tithing piece. And you know, it kind of makes me laugh on a lot of levels because, you know, I don't know, having worked in that area of, you know, writing laws and getting them passed and then enforcing them, it's like, how is that going to be enforced if they ever enacted it? Are we going to keep a roll of every person having to declare what religion they are, what church they attend, and then let's say for some reason you don't go to church on a Sunday? Do we issue a warrant for your arrest? Do we send police to your door to get you to come to church?
Yeah, church lady be after us. Oh, no.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, there's a lot of churches that would love that because it would guarantee them, you know, a greater source of income and whatever.
Yeah, bottom line, usually, unfortunately, a lot of people, you know, I'm not knocking everybody. If you want to go, that's fine. But you're right. So many of the religious churches and movements are so much based on the money. It's just really sad. You know, John, go ahead.
It's crazy. I went to a Catholic wedding a number of years ago, and it was a Saturday service, and we sat through the whole thing, and they had not passed the collection plate. So I have a friend whose wife is very Catholic, and she's going, well, I don't know. We were in church today, so does this cover me for, you know, Sunday? And I looked at her and said, they didn't pass the collection plate. She looks at me like I'm some kind of idiot, and then she goes, and the priest is standing there, and she goes, so, Father, would this count as though I went for you know, this weekly, you know, Sunday Mass? He goes, oh, no. He goes, we didn't pass the collection plate.
You nailed it. I know, it's sad, isn't it? But unfortunately, true. Yeah, but you know, what else is bugging me, though, about all of this, John, is I'll give you an example. Today, I was showering. I hear a loud knock at the door, so I, run out there. Don't open the door, obviously. I'm not quite at that state. But I holler through, who is it? I have to tell everybody, I have a big no soliciting sign, and I do mean it. If I don't know you, I'm not going to open that door. No sales, no surveys, no politics, no religion.
Right.
Okay, knock, knock. I'm your new neighbor. I just wanted to come to get to know you. And I'm thinking, oh, well, okay, they're a couple streets over. I know a house had sold, and I saw the moving truck. Oh, well, cool. Well, I'm sorry, I can't open the door. I'm not dressed right. And he said, oh, that's okay. I'll leave a postcard on your door. And I'm thinking, a postcard? Huh? So he leaves, and I slip, the door open, grab the postcard. It was for the Calvary Church here, which I thought, well, that's rather deceptive to say you're my new neighbor, but I guess it's kind of true because he's my new neighbor because the church is now being held in the big, fancy, brand-new high school that all our taxpayer dollars are paying for. Isn't that a little bit of I don't know, church and state there? I don't know, something not right.
Well, I'm wondering if I've missed the memo that meant that I have to go out and get a postcard that I can leave at other people's houses in case I visit and they're not at home. But the whole idea of the solicitation thing, I think that what you're doing is really wise. Without if you don't know somebody, you really shouldn't be answering the door. The world is a crazy place today, and you should have some sense of what's going on. Mm-hmm. But the whole idea of a church taking over the high school, even if it's only for a service that they do, I mean I think that is really a problem of separation of church and state. Because does that mean that all the other churches are going to be allowed the same access to do that in your high school?
Actually, they have been, because this is like the third or fourth one I've noticed, and it's like a revolving door there. And I didn't get postcards from any of the other ones, but just this one. But about a year and a half ago, I noticed the first one, and then it lasted about 4 or 5 months, and then all of a sudden, either it changed names or another one came in. That one lasted for quite a while, then briefly another one, and now this one. And it's like, what the heck is going on? Why is the high school just allowing this revolving door for all these different churches to use?
Well, it sounds to me that you have a problem with somebody on the school board, to be honest with you, that is advocating to allow them in there, because I don't think that public buildings are really meant for that kind of use, particularly a high school, because you have young, impressionable minds that, could be viewed that there's an endorsement by the schools or school board for whatever sect of that religion that it is.
So can I use this RFRA to say, excuse me, this is against my beliefs that you need to keep state and church separate?
Well, I'm kind of surprised that somebody hasn't objected to it, because generally you get the atheists that complain about that. I mean, we have enough trouble in the country keeping the whole idea of keeping the word God in the Pledge of Allegiance, which I think it belongs there. I don't think that should be removed. But the idea of advocating somebody's catechism or religious views is much different than that.
Right, exactly. And as you say, this is putting it in the schools. If you're starting to put it in the schools, and I noticed in some of the the elementary schools a couple of times where I've driven by going, that looks like it's going on there too. And I'm not anti-religion. I'm not against the church. I'm not anything. I mean, I have my own beliefs. But I also believe that you're right, John. These are impressionable kids, and whether they're there or not on Sundays, this stuff's going to be there.
Well, and if you remember properly the Founding Fathers, one of the reasons they really put the separation of church and state in was that the King of England had created a whole Anglican church because he had trouble with the Catholic Church for not getting his divorce. But there were religious wars that raged all through the Middle Ages of, Catholics versus Protestants, and then, the Crusaders versus the Muslims, and all of those things. As soon as you get government and religion tied together, you can be sent off on some, wild escapades that can be very devastating. We get it from the Middle East. What's all this jihad and terrorism about?
Yeah, unfortunately. It seems like fundamentalism, we've talked about this too before, John, the extremism seems to be going on right now pretty thick. But it also seems to be sometimes, and maybe this is wishful thinking on my behalf, it's always darkest before the dawn. So hopefully this is bringing it all up so we can once and for all put all of this to rest and get to a place where we can have harmony, equality, and justice for everybody, and not have to know what their sexual, orientation is, or none of that really matters.
Well, it always astounds me that, and I have to say this about the Republicans more than the Dems, but, this whole idea that they don't want any regulations on business, they want to let them run rampant and do whatever they want, and we've suffered a lot of repercussions from that, and the pollution and everything else that has happened. And in that vein, they want nobody interfering. But then when it comes to a female sexual organ, they want to be able to control everything that they do, and it is so contrary, or illogical when you put the two things side by side.
Yeah, it is. All right, America Now continues. Stay with us. All right, everybody, welcome back. John Higgins and I discussing the Religious Freedom Restoration Act here tonight on America Now. And John, you mentioned about woman's body, yeah, and we seem to still be the battleground here for so many things, but especially over this one with abortion. Well, there's legislation now that has passed in Florida, I believe it is, that would require a woman to meet with a physician 24 hours before having an abortion. And okay, some states already have that. But I think it's interesting, too, because the people who are sponsoring this, the one woman, she's probably sincere about it, Representative Jennifer Sullivan, she's hoping this empowers women, gives them some pause and time to think about what they're really doing. I can understand this. But the one person who's really pushing this is John Stemberger, and if anybody knows who he is, I can't think which group he is, but he's very vocal. He's one of those with the Boy Scouts. He's the one that's trying to keep all the gays out of the Boy Scouts, and he's been really, really vocal now for a long time about this stuff. And he has come out and said, well, the true nature of these bills is really what we want to do is choke off this procedure, i.e. meaning abortions, with regulations, And again, it's not about improving women's health. That's not the intent. Again, it's about someone else's agenda. And it really disturbs me as a woman, that we're always used as these pawns, in these elaborate agendas for these people.
Well, in the course of my life, I have met a number of women who have had abortions at various stages of their lives. And I have to say, I never walked away with a feeling that they did it arbitrarily as some kind of willy-nilly decision that came out of nowhere, or that they didn't regret it on some level at some point, in their lives. It was a very tough decision for them to make. And I think that, the government really has no business of sticking its nose in that level of a difficult thing to decide. I mean, they've taken the debate into the absurdities that if a woman is raped, that it was God's will and whatever. I mean, it is insanity. And these laws about having a woman have another 24 hours, what's going to be the difference after they talk to the doctor? Which doctor are they going to talk to? Are they going to have to specify that it's a right to life doctor? I mean, I don't understand what the reasoning is at any level for that. And after they talk to a doctor, they're going to change their mind?
Yeah, no, I've had friends who have gone through it as well, and this is an agonizing decision. It's never as anything but that. Not even depending on the circumstances by which you became pregnant. But, this whole thing about these types of laws, it's not meant to empower us as women. It's meant to punish us as women. And I, for one, am sick and tired of this. This is just crazy, because with this, these lawmakers want to punish us for exercising a fundamental civil right that was given to us by the 14th Amendment and the landmark U.S. Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade. Why does this have to keep coming up over and over and over again?
Well, I don't think it's a right that comes from any law that's created here. I think that it comes from God himself, that you have a right to control over what happens to your body. The Founding Fathers, I'm sure, would agree with that.
Yes.
That they would not think that, oh my God, they were trying to keep the government controlled. For the party that claims that government is out of control, on one hand, it's too big and too intrusive. On the other hand, they go and they want to get into, a woman's reproductive organs. But the thing that is most terrible to me is that I would have more sympathy for the position if they promised that they would take care of the child that's born afterwards.
Right.
But the same party who demands that a woman doesn't have abortions, they don't want to spend any money in terms of making sure that child's life is livable, actually, in many cases, after they're brought into the world.
Hear, hear, John. Well said, well said. What about, when we go back with the RFRA? Isn't the First Amendment enough? Why do we need these RFRA laws to begin with?
Well, the problem with that comes from is this case, I think, really, with the idea of people being able to practice their religions without breaking, a governmental law. Unfortunately, sometimes laws, you can't control things by statute. So sometimes bad things or bad outcomes come from, the side effect of a statute. An Indian smoking peyote in terms of their religious, or eating it, I don't know exactly what they do with it, but it's not like they're distributing it across the country or any of those kinds of things. It's beyond what the drug war laws were, which have their own problems. So that's where a lot of this came up and about. So it was a way of trying to remedy it. Now, it's only been since they want to use it for another agenda that it has now become the problem.
Yeah, and again, originally the first states to pass the RFRA laws were basically progressive ones. And again, it was Dems, Kennedy and Schumer, who were the ones that wrote it and sponsored it, got it passed. Progressive states were the ones who originally had it. But now, through a shift in whatever this agenda is with especially the evangelical Christian right, they want to use this. They see it as a way they can promote their own agenda. And that's really interesting, the way this is all turned about. But I think it's really going to come back to slap them hard.
Well, and the worst place to have done it is in the business community. Because you want customers. You don't want people picketing outside. You don't want people sitting there thinking that if I go into that business, they may not treat me kindly and with respect. I mean, if you discriminate against one group, how do they know it's not going to be your group that they discriminate against the next day? Because I think that's what happens with a lot of, Americans particularly. We're generally pretty good at putting ourselves in the other person's shoes. And we're always like, cheerleaders or protectors of the underdog.
Yeah, exactly. And not that this is neat, and that's it. We've got to get away from this mentality of people being underdogs. As a woman, I'm sick of being one. And, the LGBT community looked at it as different. We've got to get to the point, and I think we're there. We're probably only a generation away from it anyway, where people say, this doesn't make any sense. We're all equal. We're all worthy of having the same rights. in this country. And hallelujah when we get to that point, because this, I believe, was why America was founded.
Exactly. The whole American experiment is, in many ways, protecting people's rights and their ability to pursue, have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They don't want laws that basically restrict that or whatever. But if they keep playing this agenda, their true colors keep coming out more and more. And I don't understand why any political party would be backing people who have cruel streaks and they're out to punish other people all the time. I mean, I'd never vote for anybody who's trying to be cruel to somebody else or wants to punish somebody.
Yeah.
That's dictatorships. That's not democracies. Those politicians should be joining us together and trying to help, provide services and protections for everybody in the country. Not taking one group and setting it against another, or trying to, throw some kind of agenda on top of everybody that is under the guise of something that, it's expanding somebody's rights and it's doing nothing like that at all.
Spreading hatred, and hatred has absolutely no place. Never has and never should have, nor will it have a place here in America.
They should have been born in Nazi Germany.
Exactly.
That society was very well run. It was very efficient. There was plenty of profit, and there wasn't anything that they did not take advantage of. If you've seen the films from the concentration camps, they kept the hair, the gold in the teeth, the shoes. I mean, that's corporate, profit making at its best.
All right, John, we're out of time, unfortunately. All right, everybody, stay tuned to another edition of Practical Solutions for America next week.